Classes in session. How you doing? And welcome to Unlearn 16 Classes in Session. Today, you just get me. I know sometimes that's disappointing, but I saw a TikTok and it got me two things. TikToks tend to get me one of two things: enraged and sort of triggers my thought process a little bit to raising the question to actually have a nuanced discussion about what we need, why we need it, and what's going so horrifically wrong in the world around us. And of course, it has to do with teaching. So let me describe the TikTok first of all. So the TikTok was this gentleman who, I don't know if he was trying to defend teachers. He could have been badly. He could have been, but he didn't do it right. And this was his premise. His premise was, heaven help him. His premise was teachers don't need the education we have to do the job we're doing. And heaven help him, at some point he said, they're just babysitting grade twos. Who I'm going to call him Steve. I don't know his name, but he feels like a Steve to me. Listen, because then he goes on to say, we've created these overqualified teachers with master's degrees and extra education and all of these things. And meanwhile, we don't pay them enough for that education. Steve, slow your roll. First of all, for the love, I would love it if people didn't step so far out of their lane they get hit by that Mack truck. But here comes the truck, Steve. Listen, teachers aren't overeducated for what they're doing. They are underpaid for the knowledge they require to do the job well. Now, at some point, he makes the assertion that teachers are getting smarter and smarter and smarter, yet our kids are getting less and less intelligent. Their grades and everything is all going to hell in a handbasket. Steve, you cannot objectively measure any of that by the by. All right. So I don't even know where to start, guys, because number one, I would change teachers college 100%. Number two, I would absolutely change teachers education. But number three, in no way, shape, or form would I make it easier or less than, period. They should be the most highly qualified individuals on the planet that are taking care of everybody's children in their most formative years. Let's start with the classroom, Steve. So the classroom nowadays isn't like the classroom when you went to school, love, in 1982. Number one, kids don't just drop out at 15 and get a job working on the GM line anymore. It doesn't happen. Kids can't drop out. In a lot of capacities, they have to stay in school. We keep them in school, and we've built a system, which, by the way, this is the system's fault, not a teacher's fault. We built a system whereby we tell them they have to graduate, every kind of student. We tell them they have to graduate in this particular structured setting. And if they don't, you're never getting a good job. You're never, like in Ontario, I think if you're 8, you have to be 18 in order to graduate, as long as you can to leave school, as long as you have your high school degree or diploma, whatever it's called. So we've completely changed that. So number one, if you're a student, you will be in high school. There is no leaving. There is no passing go and collecting $200. You will stay there until you graduate. Now, here's the problem of the system. Again, not the teacher, Steve. The problem of the system is this. They realize that they kept kids in school that can't necessarily, or that don't necessarily want to be in school. They don't try. They don't give it an effort. That's one type of kid, right? But we're going to pass them anyway. Want to know why, Steve? Because the government doesn't want to keep paying for them to be in school. So now we've shifted curriculum. We've shifted expectations. Heaven help us. We've shifted assessment levels in order to very quickly and somewhat ridiculously pass students again and again and again to get them the hell out of education, out of high school. Out you go into the workforce. Yay, you got your diploma. And again, not a teacher's fault. If you want to talk to a teacher about how they want to reform the educational system, I would argue that's probably the number one thing. Some students don't put in the effort or the work in order to pass a course they shouldn't pass. Now, Steve, let's dial it down to something else. We also have a lot of students with learning exceptionalities. Now, back in your day, Steve, as well as mine, those kids would just be booted out of school or put in the, in the classroom where there's like three kids in the library and given whatever to play with until they got their way through high school. And that was that. But now what we've done, rightly so, by the way, is integrate all of these different learners into one classroom. And that classroom size, even though it used to be big back in our day, now that classroom size is growing and growing exponentially every single year. However, Steve, there are at least in a class of 30, I would say 10 distinct, and this is an underestimation, 10 distinct learning styles, learning exceptionalities, and personalized, individually created educational programs in order to target that student. You want to know the problem with that? There is no teacher on this planet who can do that effectively in a class of 30. So, what ends up happening? Well, lots of things. Kids get passed by, kids get pushed forward, and we can't ever necessarily get at what we need to get at. If a kid is dyslexic, I swear to God, I have seen them just give them books on tape. What? What? We modify, there's two different things. We can accommodate and we can modify. I'm against modification in every way, shape, or form. Here's why. If I have a standard for a course, and that standard is you are to write a 2-page essay, let's say, different kids might want to get at that information in a different way. They might need more time to do the essay. They might need different strategies to help them, delineate material. They maybe need a lot of writing help, a lot of literacy help in order to get them up to par to be able to perform that task. Guess what? We just don't do it. If a kid doesn't like it, if in their IEP, which I also have a problem with, says they're not, this is the skill set that they're lacking in, okay. So a lot of schools will just accommodate and give them a different type of assignment. I have a problem with that. Here's why I have a problem with that. Kids are in school to get better at the things they're not good at, not just to excel at the things they are already great at. Let me say it again. Kids should be in school, and education should be built to ensure that kids become good at the things they're not great at and excel at the things they're already good at. And in order to do that, you cannot have a class of 30 with all those different exceptionalities. You cannot be pulled in 52 directions. You need to be able to develop that plan and focus on that student. And sometimes that student and that particular skill might take longer than you would like. Okay, fine. Also, that particular student who maybe isn't good at writing essays or they have literacy roadblocks in their way, guess what? That kid might be amazing at standing in front of the class and giving a speech or giving a presentation. That kid might be amazing at doing an art project and describing its application to the cultural, historical, and social realities of revolutionary France. Are you with me? But no, that's not what we do. We built an education system whereby, number one, we rely heavily on written forms of assessment, which is a problem, by the way, because there is no time when you get out of school that you're ever required to write necessarily an essay if you're not in academia. But what you are required to do throughout your entire life is stand up in front of a room and talk in front of many different groups of people, many different types of people, many different realities, right? Number one fear of everybody, fear of public speaking. We don't even push this in high school via curriculum. We just keep adding curriculum, adding more content, more content, more content. When in actuality, what we should be understanding, what we should be doing is minimizing content because the content isn't the thing. Teaching kids how to learn, how to express themselves, how to develop skills, that's the thing. But when I have to teach American history from 1775 until now, That content that we have pretended as though matters way more. The matters way more than the how. Why have we done that? Well, it's quite easy because it seems simple. It gives the illusion, the pretense of being objective. It is not, because it tests a very specific student in a very specific capacity and a very specific mindset in a world that isn't like when we went to school, Steve. It just isn't. Kids today aren't less intelligent. They are juggling 57 balls in the air. They know what's going on in Israel and Palestine. They know what's going on in down the street. They know what's going on in the interweb with AI and ChatGPT and kids across the world. They know all of these things. Everything is getting more intricate, more overwhelming. The consumption and the access to information is a tidal wave. And we are assuming that sit down, be quiet, memorize dates, times, and names is actually useful. Remember when we were a kid and we say you'd never have a calculator when you're anywhere, so you might want to do the mental math? Well, yeah, we do. We do, Steve. It's on our phone. Everything is shifted, and education needs to shift. But the government predominantly, not teachers, the government predominantly doesn't want to shift education because this kind of education is going to take longer. This kind of education is going to require less kids in a class. This kind of education is going to require teachers and students to become amazing critical thinkers that can access and analyze and synthesize information more than anyone ever has before. Does that sound like a space we don't want our teachers to be highly educated? Steve, is that it? Because I feel like, Steve, you're just looking for a way for teachers not to get paid what they deserve. If they have less education, you would like to cut their paycheck in half just to babysit the little 2-year-olds. Are you insane? Let me give you a psychological evaluation tool here, Steve. Most psychiatrists would say 70% of who you are going to be and how you become a person and what you learn and how you see the world is formed between the ages of, I'd say, 4 and 7. Whoo! Grade 1, 2, and 3. Grade 1, 2, and 3. And before that, obviously, but kids develop a sense of self and awareness. This is where kids will develop a fear or a hatred of certain subjects. You want to ask somebody when they started hating math? It was grade 3. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on in grade 3. Probably because they jam pack a whole bunch of kids in that classroom and they don't have, and here's a direct sort of issue with what Steve's suggesting, because I think teachers should be more specialized, more educated, because the grade 3 math teacher isn't a specialist in math. Just because you can do grade 3 math, and some of us still have a little trouble, doesn't mean you can teach it. Or you can teach it in the multifaceted, multi-layered kind of way that different students with different learning abilities, different viewpoints, different perspectives, different paths will actually understand it. That's the brilliance. We should be paying teachers way more. And I haven't even got to the hard part yet, Steve, because the hard part is something completely different. And the hard part is this, and any teacher that's listening to this right now will 100% agree with me. I don't care if it's elementary or high school. The majority of my job, the majority, has nothing to do with how I teach history or what history I teach or how I assess necessarily. The majority of what I do has to do with the student that's sitting in front of me, the developmental state they have reached, what learning exceptionalities they have, and how I can conceivably get at them to make them, to open doors so they can become the best possible student, the best thinker, the best analytical, critical entity that they possibly can be. That's the hard job. And you want to know what teachers don't have? That education. I realize some teachers chose to, but you don't have to. Is that understood? When I went to university, what was my job? Well, my job was to take a major and a minor, and those two teachables would be my high school teachables. I never once, not once, had to take a child developmental psychology course. Never once had to take a course on teens who are at risk. Never once had to take a course on developmental delays and different learning exceptionalities. Never once had to take a course on ADHD. Never once had to take a course on all of the different traumas and all of the different mental health scenarios that will get in the way, that will weigh a student down and make it impossible for them to accomplish their goals. Why aren't we doing that? Because we're still under the belief, and society is still under the belief, teachers aren't. The teachers are there to manage, to babysit, to be a relay of information. You want to start changing the future? You want to make your kids brilliant thinkers? You want to make your kids analytical entities? You have to change the nature of this system, and teachers need to start learning what those developmental cycles look like. We need to shift. I need to know history, sure. A math teacher needs to know math, 100%. All of those things are true. But also, by the way, this is what I would do with Teachers College. Want to know what I would do? All of those courses that I took when I was Teachers College, I'd throw them out. Throw them out in the garbage. Bye. Teachers College to me, no matter what course you're teaching, should be a 2-year degree, postgraduate degree. So you need an undergrad first, in which it is an intensive study about developmental child psychology, about mental health issues, about clinical and formulaic assessments of what kids can do and how they can do them. It should be a course that teaches what an IEP is good for, the difference between an accommodation and a modification, the way that we can possibly see and quickly identify students that not only have educational barriers, but also have mental health and home life barriers. Because everybody loves to talk about how to protect kids, and all of these groups all over the internet are saying the teachers are doing this, they're brainwashing, they're indoctrinating. Listen, let's be honest. Damage that is done to our youth, physical damage, emotional damage, SA damage, those calls, for the most part, the vast majority, those calls are coming from inside the house. And you want to know what I don't have a degree in, what I don't have an expertise in? Recognizing that, dealing with that, helping a kid get help because of that. We have to make phone calls, but at the end of the day, I'm not that expert. How in the hell, when we spend 8 hours a day with these students, how is it not part of my job to become the most educated in being able to see the symptoms, see the clear indications of kids that are going through hell and back at home? Why not? Why not? You know why? Government doesn't necessarily want to do that because parents would lose their mind. And the only parents who would lose their mind are the ones that like to indoctrinate, like to keep their kids' doors shut, and like to keep what goes on in the family in the family. Those parents. The ones that say things like, I should be in charge of everything my kid learns. That one scares the bejesus out of me. You want to know what my mom never would have been scared of? More education. My mom never would have been scared of, ever, a teacher saying things, talking about consent or talking about mental health in a significant way, talking about what addiction looks like in the home, talking about what mental health issues look like in the home. My mom never would have been afraid of that, because I'll tell you this. If somebody thought my mom was causing me harm in any way, shape, or form, my mom would want to know about it so she could fix it. Any parent that says, I don't want them in my... Those parents are usually trying to hide something. Now, I know what some of you are going to say, because this is very, very, very true. The government and different government agencies have utilized sort of stepping into a kid's household in order to particularly erase and destroy indigenous culture. Understand very, very, very clearly that's not what I'm talking about. Nobody is advocating for that. But if more teachers were educated, especially on indigenous issues, especially on different cultural, can you imagine a math teacher who really understood what social construction of gender was? Or a science teacher who definitely pushed the boundaries of why we've categorized it race, what was the social implications of that? Or an English teacher. Like, all of these teachers should have this information because you can't teach the student without understanding the world in which they live. By the way, the second huge input of my money would go to social services. I would, quadruple their pay and quadruple their education, and their oversight to make sure that um, none of that, this 60s scoop and all of that horrific focus of our government at that time was halted in its tracks. But all of this being true, this would make teachers some of the most intellectually, socially, developmentally educated and aware individuals. And those are the people we want teaching our kids. Name a better person. Now, you could say, Joanna, that's going to cost too much money. That's absolutely insane. Okay, so we can argue about money, where money should be spent, if it should be spent here, what the future ramifications were, yada, yada, yada. But I'm pretty sure you can't argue that this would be a bad idea. There's no way you could argue we don't need that in the classroom. By the way, elementary school teachers should be way higher paid than me. Why? Because that's foundational. A kid can't do grade 10 math because in grade 3, he stopped doing it. We need math specialists in elementary school. We need science specialists in elementary school. We need literacy specialists in elementary school, specifically that can handle things like that, have been educated in how to fix and help forms of dyslexia and learning impasses. Those are the people that we need. And I'm just telling you all of the different aspects that need to go into what teacher is sitting in front of your kid in the classroom. And in no way, shape, or form do I say they need less education. What they need is less stupid education. What they need is less conversations about how to give a really good report and how to write a good rubric. Stop it. That's not it. The education system also needs to shift. And if more teachers were highly educated, they start pushing that envelope even more, right? We want our kids to be able to write. Of course we do, but not only. But not only. We want our students to be able to stand in that room and give a speech or lead that debate and convince people in that room and be able to speak on and articulate the complex thoughts that they're having, not just simply write them down. I would chuck all forms of standardized testing. Why? Because it's garbage. Standardized tests are an illusion. They're a government bait and switch. It is a bullcrap notion of dangling a standardized test in front of you and saying this is the objective measure we can decide and we can define and we can somehow categorize your level of potential and intelligence. What absolute garbage. What garbage. And the more we hear about standardized tests, by the way, outside of the Felicity Huffmans of the world, buying off what they can buy in order to get their kids good marks and get the right tests and get them into the right place and we realize that all of these things are a cash grab and it gives the illusion the government has done something so that educational model somehow measures up to this standardized test. Now, do I understand that different schools might have different levels of qualifications? Yeah, but nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about. I went to Anderson High School in Whitby. That's in Ontario. Some of my friends went to Henry. Listen, everybody and their brother knew. Everybody. Everybody knew that an A on a paper in Henry Street High School was worth a B at Anderson, period. Yet, Henry and Anderson both apply to universities at the same time. Nobody cares. The university does not care about what high school you came from, right? So what ends up happening? Well, you end up having kids, maybe without the best possible academic records, bump to the head of the line to get into universities. Now, what have universities done? Well, you think they would get harder, but they haven't. Want to know why? Because now they're businesses. They're businesses who are trying to get more and more kids in them, rather than academic institutions built on being actual defining um, entities that really test and push somebody's academic capacity. The amount of take home tests that go on at universities today makes me giggle. Absolutely. The standards get lower. And the standards get lower not because of the teachers, not because of the professors, not because of the students. Want to know why? Because of the parents. Because of the parents and the taxpayers and the people who want their kid to have everything. They got to get a good education. They got to get really good marks. They got to go to the right thing. Nobody's talking about what actually should be talking about is, does the A they got in history actually reflect their skill, their capacity, their work ethic? Does it? Nobody's talking about that. We've chucked it out the window in hopes for universities making more money, in hopes of universities pretending to be the bastions of whatever. You want to talk about why kids are out in the world without the skill set? Because we haven't demanded it from them. Because when your student was in grade 10 and she cheated on the final exam, and instead of failing her the way it should have happened, you came in and went to bat and said, oh, she shouldn't fail, it's going to be bad for her mental health, and she'll never do it again, and whatever you, and all of a sudden she gets passed. No, we are doing a disservice by making education easier. And we are also doing a disservice simultaneously to the student, because we are shoving way too many kids in one classroom and we are not helping them. The public system is not helping, it is not teaching, it is not pushing them to understand where their limitations lie. It is not pushing them to understand where their insecurities are or where their weaknesses are. Sorry, it took me a while to get to that word. It's not doing that. It's saying ignore your weakness. Don't worry about it. You don't want to stand up in front of the class because you get nervous? That's fine. You never have to do it. Here's your A. What? It's not because our kids are less intelligent, because I'm going to tell you right now, I've been teaching for 21 years. They are brilliant. They are brilliant. They are capable. They are powerful. But everybody, including the government, including the taxpayer, including the parent, including teachers college, all of these different aspects, they all need to get together and understand that a good, healthy education system is going to cost a boatload of money. It's going to demand incredible things. But if we don't lay the foundation, if we don't lay the groundwork for our students and our expectations of these brilliant little minds, they will not live up to the standards because we don't set them. Push them through because they just should be? No. I would probably guess that if we were being honest, a lot more kids would fail courses. And if we were really honest about the kids that would fail courses, it would stop being such a horrific stigma and an embarrassment for that student. And it would just mean simply, you weren't up to it yet. Not never. You didn't develop the skill set yet. That part of your brain still needs to develop a little bit more. We still need to build you up. You still have more learning to do in this capacity, and that's not a problem. That is the thing you have to do. That is the thing that's going to make you a superstar. Because I'm telling you right now, if we stop kids from only taking courses that they like, number one, is a problem, made them more of a holistic learner, every single student would have courses that they'd struggle with. So, since when is struggle bad? Struggle is only bad if it is diminished, if it is bullied, if it's made fun of as being somehow inferior. But what I promise you is that every single person has a struggle. Great, put it on the table. Show it. And then say, but that struggle I'm going to get better at. Everybody has one. And how dare we? How dare we just push kids through again and again and again to save them from what? Because if we were all being honest and we all put our struggles on the table, we would all have something we need to get better at. We would all have something we'd probably have to redo. So there goes the shame, there goes the embarrassment. And we can actually talk about developmental psychology and how it impacts different kids at different times, and how their entire world, their holistic learning experience is never the same as the kid sitting beside them just because they happen to be 16 years old. So yeah, Steve, you're wrong. Education and teachers need more education. Maybe different from what we're pushing right now. They need to be paid a hell of a lot more. They need more specialization. They need more understanding of students. The public needs to understand this is the number one thing. We should be flooding money into that system. And I don't care what kind of government you are. I really don't. Conservative, Democrat, I don't care. You should all want and you should all understand this is the play. This is the play for the future. It should be in our Constitution as a constitutional right. Because what we're doing with it right now is we're playing loose and fast with politics, and we're moving around kids' education and what they're allowed to read and what they're not allowed to read and what information they're allowed to be put on and how it has to be done. And all of that is happening, and we're playing politics with kids' futures. And it's embarrassing, it's destructive, and trust me, in 20 years, you will feel the weight of it. But that's why politicians don't care right now. Because in 20 years, they're likely not to be in office. And in 20 years, that's when they're going to see the fruits of their labor. So it also depends on us, the voting people. It depends on us. In places like Canada, that is a provincial jurisdiction, but federal money always comes down and gets transferred to each province. That is on us. What do we think are the mass majority of money should go, how it should go there, and what kind of educational requirements and classroom dynamics do we need to create in order to facilitate the best and the brightest students coming out of that system with the most confidence and the most critical ability? What do we have to do to get that? Not what do we have to do to get our kids to pass the literacy test that hasn't mattered to anybody in the entire time it's been created? Not what is the bare minimum that we have to do in order to cycle our kids through the education system so they can get out and stop costing us money. And it sure as hell is not about devaluing education and telling kids they don't need post-secondary. Who the heck needs it? They're saying that because we have purposefully, in a lot of capacities, devalued education and what it is, and we've done that through gutting the system time and time and time again. That needs to stop today. So, Steve, I hope that answers your question, and I'll try to answer it on TikTok in a fewer words and maybe, a nice pop-up book or something for you. Hun? But until that TikTok, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat station. Dismissed.